I'm going to say sissy because that's the correct terminology, but like sissy chested, sissy jawed ones that just look at you. And I just am terrified that if I have vertical pins at home that they can just walk right out and escape. That's a big deal for me. I'm not saying that they got to be, like big chested, like maybe the goat boys like them, but like those things got to be opened up underneath. And like when they look at you, like I want them to be like, you don't want to see me in a dark alley. That's where I'm at.
Welcome back to the Drench Line. I'm Sam Silvers with Newsom. This is real talk for the show industry. We're answering the questions we get asked every day, providing our take on what's going on in the industry.
Guys, if you're getting anything out of this, we'd like to invite you to hit like, follow, subscribe, all the stuff, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. If you've got questions, drenchline.com. Love to hear some feedback, see what you guys have got, maybe some thoughts, concerns, maybe some things that you like, maybe some things you'd like to see, anybody you'd like to see on the show, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, follow us on social media too as well. Silvers Livestock, Newsom Livestock. Be looking for our upcoming sales. We got one actually this weekend, the 806 live sale coming up. So that's going to be a good one here that Logan and his family's putting on.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of it. Obviously, we're right in the middle of sheep buying season, goat buying season, in the thralls of it. Here in Texas, we're, kind of right, just right in the middle of it. We've got everything going, and so we've got to sell this weekend. So, as we kind of talked and we kind of briefly talked last time, we were kind of hitting on, selection and what that looks like as far as picking one out for your kid. So we're in the pen. What's the one that hits you? What's the thing that hits you like first glance? What's the thing that really you gravitate towards whenever you're looking for that one for the kids?
Yeah, so I thought about that on the way up here at a 4.5 hour drive and tried to space out as the kids were in the back seat, telling each other how much they hate each other and slapping and kicking and fighting. So you tend to kind of zone out. I'm sure you do that as a dad as well.
I don't. No, I tell them usually what we try to do when we're driving is I tell them 3 things that I'm proud of them.
Okay. Maybe I need to start doing that. So I was thinking about this topic on the way up here, and it's like I just try to go back in my mind and replay like when I was at your house on Tuesday and we walked in to a pen of sheep. Because it's kind of like second nature to me at this point, right? So I was trying to replay it in my mind, like what is the one thing that I look for first? And typically there's a group of lambs in there. They're kind of all bunched up together. I think the one thing that I look for is body shape, maybe center body, and forearm. Those are the 2 first things that I look at before I say, hey, catch that one right there.
Whenever you walk into the pen, like, are you one of those that like, as they come into the pen, maybe you're looking at somebody's house, and I've struggled with this a little bit, being in sales mode as a breeder, and also like whenever I go to somebody's house, like you like to watch them, run around, move around. Sometimes maybe they kind of act crazy, like you said, they all bunch up. Would you rather watch those things move, watch them for a little while, and then tell whoever's in the pen with you, whether it's the kids or maybe the breeder, hey, catch this one, catch that one? Or would you rather that breeder maybe, hone in on some of the ones that he likes and just start showing them to you, and then you're taking notes on your phone?
Yeah, I don't think that it really matters to me. I think whatever that breeder wants to do is fine. If he wants to go in there and start catching them, he or she, and showing them, because typically these things that we're looking at are going to be in an online sale more than likely now, or some sale of some sort. So, if they catch them and they catch them in the order they're going to put them in, it's kind of neat to just go through them all and start taking notes as they go, And I think you owe that to them, right, a little bit, because even if you don't like the sheep, they're still proud of him and they put a lot of time
Sure.
and effort into him. So let them show them to you, and keep your comments to yourself, write it on your phone. Hey, that one sucks, whatever. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's kind of how we are, and I always, like I said, always kind of, I guess whenever I'm showing sheep at the house and we have customers there looking, I'll kind of wait for a little while, and I'll let them kind of watch them walk around, and then if they don't come out initially and say, "Oh, hey, what's that one? Catch that one," then I'll just kind of start going through, maybe my routine. But I like it also whenever I'm at someone's house and I'm, on the purchasing side of it. Those guys have been looking at those sheep since they were in the jug. Like, we're in there for a small window. You're looking, you're trying to make notes on your phone. Hopefully maybe you're going to get a chance to see them again, or go back through them or whatever. But those guys have seen them since they were in the jugs, from the time they did tails on them and marked them and, all the things. So they've seen them for 50, 60, 70 days of their life. They know what their moms are like. I want their opinion. I want to see kind of the ones that they like. And, and that's one thing that we talked about in the last episode, having those conversations with those guys, having those conversations with those breeders, because those guys have, now, if they're like me, and I'm sure you're probably the same way, like, I'm very opinionated of some of them, and I'm probably a little more passionate of, like, certain ewes and certain ewe lines or maybe certain bucks that I'm like, man, I know that thing's going to feed. I know there's going to be some good stuff there, even if he's the skinny little ratty one or whatever that looks like. But I think that's one of those deals that, like, having those conversations with those guys and seeing which ones they like. And again, going back to our, that second episode where we're talking about what's your goal, where are you going? Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Where are we at budget wise? Like, let's kind of get a handle and let those guys maybe guide you a little bit of, okay, I think the biggest thing that we've probably tried to do the last week while we've been showing the set that we've got that we're selling on Saturday, that's one of the deeper sets that I feel like we've put together personally. And it can be a deal if you're not fairly advanced and kind of have a good idea of what you're after. It could be a little overwhelming if you walk in there into that, a couple of those pins and just like, maybe aren't quite as advanced in your selection, or maybe you're a newer family and you're trying to learn and trying to get through it. Like, if all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I've got 15 of these things wrote down. Like, which one am I going to buy? And so I think that's where you can kind of rely on that breeder of, okay, hey, I starred these. I liked these. You set them up. Things looked good. I like this about them. I like that about them. If I'm going to San Antonio or I'm going to Houston, which one do you like? Maybe give me 3 numbers. And that's what we try to always kind of like work off of, okay, hey, there's 3 or 4 of those there that I like for this show, or hey, there's 3 or 4 that I like maybe within this particular budget that I could see kind of being there. And, I always slide a little sleeper in the deal whenever, I'm in sales mode a little bit, and I'm like, hey, I like lot 1, lot 3, lot 5, but I really like lot 11. If that thing stays undervalued, like, I could see that sheep feeding really well, and I could see him doing well down the road. And so, I guess just to kind of kick back what we talked about, in that last episode where we were talking about, having that dialogue with breeders and just kind of having interaction and, getting a feel for where you need to be.
What do you, I stated it, center body,
Sure.
forearms important. That's probably the first initial thing that I look for. And I know we can go a lot further in depth and go down a rabbit hole and talk about what those terms mean. But I would challenge the audience probably to look up those terms and get the descriptions for those. But what does Logan Newsom look for when he walks in him? What's the first thing that catches your eye?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's, obviously 2 big isindicators that we're big on: body shape and forearm. Like, I do think that forearm is one of those things that personally I feel like maybe isn't focused on quite as much as it should be. It'll probably still come maybe a little bit old school, and that's probably, judging team coaches whenever we were 8, 9, 10 years old, and they're talking about the indicators of muscle, long term. And so arm's still like a big deal that I just probably naturally gravitate towards. Body shape's big for us. I think at the same time, and we talk, and I had this conversation with a guy earlier, we were talking about Texas majors. Those things got to be big hipped and they got to be big pinned. And if they are not big hipped and big pinned and just kind of have that just look whenever, and it's such an easy thing to see. It's one of those deals that it can't be hid, from a shower standpoint, or, it doesn't matter if they're propped up or they're loose. Like, when those things run by, they're either big hipped or they're not. And, I think a lot of that obviously can relate to, expansion up high and, just what kind of sheep that is. Like, we don't find many of those things that are, big forearm, big ribbed, and big hipped that are, frail featured and sissy jawed and all that. I mean, those kind of things a lot of times will always go hand in hand. So, we talked last time, and like we show in Texas, muscle still drives it. Like, those things have to have muscle. These are market shows. These are, things that we have to have. And really, like, we can say in Texas, like, that's true everywhere. Like, these are market shows. These things have to be stout. They have to have muscle. And so, once we kind of start going past that and we start looking at those things, like you said, forearm, body shape, big pins, like, you start kind of checking off a few of those boxes of like, hey, that one might be pretty good. Let's catch him, and I guess that's kind of where we probably land. And then that kind of, you know, the unique part about those things in my mind is those are all things that you can see loose. You can see those sheep. You can analyze all of those indicators, even if you're in the pen by yourself. Even if you're at home watching, hey, this is my project, and that judge said this about him, or do I think this is good or do I think this is bad? That's just reading the livestock. That's just some evaluation skills there that you can kind of develop, and those are all things that you don't have to have. The kid setting them up, or the breeder, or whatever that looks like. That's just things that, like, initially, like when they're loose, when they're running around, when they first walk in the pen, boom, boom, boom. Those are things that we're going after.
What do you think what's the one flaw that you can't put up with in a sheep or a goat? What's the one thing that's like, I'm out, can't do it, it's done?
I don't know. That's gonna. I mean, that again. We kind of talked about. How far down a rabbit hole, like, do you want to go? Like, I'm gonna say sissy because that's the correct terminology. But like, sissy chested, sissy jawed ones that just look at you, and I just am terrified that if I have vertical pins at home, that they can just walk right out and escape. That's a big deal for me. Like, I'm not saying that they got to be, like, big chested, like maybe the goat boys like them, but like, those things got to be opened up underneath. And like, when they look at you, like, I want them to be like, you don't want to see me in a dark alley. That's where I'm at.
Kind of reminds you kind
It's, it's,
of maybe
it's,
a little bit.
it's like you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the vertical panel deal, like, I could see you slipping through some from time to
The
time.
nose slips through some cracks. I think for me, I don't know. Maybe it changes a little bit, right? And I think it to me it changes because this industry changes so fast, so quick. And then we have a different set of judges and evaluators every year that are going to take different animals. And you know, probably my hot take is don't always buy the sheep you like. Sometimes you got
Absolutely.
to feed the sheep to fit the judge. So at the end of the spring when you're sitting there pissing and moaning because you got beat, it's probably because you showed a sheep you like. You didn't take the sheep that the judge likes.
And like,
I hear that a lot.
that is such a, it's such an easy thing to hedge, but at the same time, it's like maybe the hardest thing. Because if you have like a strong opinion, and if, especially I would say the guys that are breeders, and maybe we consider ourselves good at this, like, you've got a kind, like, and you probably raise the kind that you like. So therefore, in turn, you want to show the kind you like, all the stuff. And that's perfectly fine. Like, I don't love looking at sheep that maybe I don't particularly like, but it's this game that we play, and like, we've got these guys, that and I'm not saying they're right, and I'm not saying they're wrong, like, but we've got these guys that they prioritize things differently than what we do. They might sit here for, these first couple of things that we've talked about, and they're like, boy, those guys are dumbasses. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. And that's cool. Like, I have no problem with that. But if you kind of, do your homework a little, and you're educated on who it is, or maybe you've showed to them. That's always been the deal that where I'm at on, like, guys that we show to. I don't care if they like the kind that I've got. I don't care if they don't like them, and I really don't care that first time if we win or lose. I just want the next time we show to them for there to be some consistency with what they did the last time. Because if I got beat the first time, I'm gonna take notes, and I'm gonna be like, okay, so and so liked him like this. Maybe I don't necessarily agree with him 100%, but I saw what he was doing. I understood it. Okay, I'm gonna go home, and like, next time we've got him at this show or that show, I'm gonna be ready. And so that's the thing that, wrapping into that, difference, and, with different evaluators, and like what you said, like, yeah,
Take notes. I don't do this, but I still remember when I was a kid and we would haul to, that's when TCLA was big, and we were hauling to, 50, 60 jackpots a year. And I still remember my mom had a little like book.
yeah,
She would write all the placings down. She would write down what the judges liked, didn't like, and we had all that in a book.
Yeah,
to watch that kind of
absolutely.
stuff. So it's kind of neat. So when we went to selecting stuff later on, we kind of knew what to haul to.
Well, and I think the unique part about today's world as compared to what we were doing back then, we're talking obviously, late 90s, early 2000s, like all you have to do is jump on Facebook, YouTube, um, Ringside. Like, I mean, a lot of these shows are, filmed and,
Rewatch it,
broadcast and rewatch it. Like,
listen
hear
to it.
what those guys say, listen to them. Like, hey, every time that Connor Brew judges, man, like, he keeps saying these words. Like, I need to figure out what he's saying about that because he's doing my county show. Or, Steve Sturts is doing this. Like, he keeps talking about this kind that he likes, that he likes. I mean, we have such a unique disposal of tools available for where we're at in today's game as compared to like what you talked about. Like, all right, we're gonna have to drive across the country. We're gonna have to show this guy. We don't know what he really likes. Like, have you ever heard of him? Like, I mean, how many times have you heard that? Have you heard of this guy? Like, I don't have any idea who he is. And you go show it to him, you're like, oh, he's good or he's bad or whatever that looks like. But yeah, I mean, kind of do your homework. I mean, and I knew that I was going to bring this up at some point, and it's challenging, and I know there's probably going to be some of my buddies that, you know, say that I'm a little bit full of it. But I've always tried whenever we jackpot, and those guys, and I know we're kind of going down the judge deal, but I think it's important. Whenever we go and jackpot and we show to these guys, I don't care at all what they're saying or how we place. I just want to be like, I want to see what our stock looks like out in the ring, and in a big ring, I want to see what they look like, and I want to see what we can kind of go home with, and then I also want to see, okay, why he didn't like this one or why he didn't like that one, or maybe why he did like that one, and we got along very, very well that day. But I don't necessarily care about the placing. Like, it's just a scrimmage. Like, we all, go to these jackpots and like you want to win and you want to be successful, but like at the end of the day, you're just kind of a bunch of scrimmages leading up to this one big game. And so we've always tried to like kind of push the results away, and focus more on, hey, what did that thing look like? How do I need to change some stuff whenever I get home? What can the kids do better showing wise? Like all the different, little things, and just be very objective with it instead of leaving there kicking the bucket like, man, that guy put me third and those two in front of me were awful.
Yeah.
And so we've always kind of tried to do that, like
preseason.
Yeah, like preseason, like, and just kind of look at it from that standpoint and be like, okay, this is what I got to do. I know that I'm showing down the road, and I know kind of what I need to do and how I need to make sure things, continue to evolve and move forward this way. But at the same time, hey, that guy kept saying that he didn't like my sheep or my goat because of this. I need to kind of file that away and remember, because the next time I show to him, I want to have one of those.
So we talked about, obviously, not getting too far on the judges, we talked about initial selection, right? And we both agreed that center body, forearm is the initial call we look at. We talked about something that, you had stated that your one absolute turnoff is going to be, sissy chested and sissy jawed. Nose chest whip to him, something like that. I think to me, the absolute turnoff to me is, hind legs.
Yep.
Just, I mean, if it's got a terrible hind leg on it, I'm out. And we can look at it in a million different ways. But to me, if I'm looking at them behind them and their hawk's bow out, I'm out. I'm done from that point forward. So.
Well, and I think that obviously goes into, and I shouldn't say maybe obviously, but something that we've probably all done it, and we've made that mistake, like, oh, maybe if I trim his feet, or maybe if I take him slow, or whatever that looks like. It's one of those things structurally, and that's why you listen to Livestock Judging 101, and guys will preach structure just so much. Like a feed bucket and exercise program doesn't change it, right? Like it's one of those deals, like sometimes like, hey, if I could, get a little extra bark on that one, I can maybe make him look a little wider than he is. Or, hey, if I'll really, really treadmill, I can make that one stifle, a little bubblier and, a little more shape, or, whatever that looks like. Hind leg structure flaws.
Can't change it.
Ain't gonna change it.
And I always say you can't polish a turd. You just can't.
Fact. I've never tried. That's
you can polish some stones to a high shine, polish some stuff maybe into a diamond, but you definitely
not
can't polish
not a turd. Okay. So we're in the pen still. We're analyzing these things. Guys, maybe they've given us a chance to watch them kind of move around. The big four-armed one that's big center bodied big flat hip.
We got him pulled out.
Got him pulled out,
He's set up.
set up.
What are we looking at now? Now
Okay.
he's set up. What are we looking at now?
So I guess maybe I'm a little, prototypical Texan, I guess maybe, kind of grew up in that era. Maybe Papa K just kind of beat it into my head. Them things got to touch good. Like, if they don't touch good, if they're not crispy, hard, shapely, going back to that deal, other guys can disagree, and that's perfectly fine. But, like, we like those things to touch big, and we like them to touch shapely and firm. And again, that's kind of going back to some of those indicators of muscle. Like we talked about that kind of being, still the focal point. Like if they're big rolled up back, if their edges are big, if their loin's big, like those things have muscle. And, a lot of times the unique part is you can see it even before you touch it. Them ones that are a little butterfly backed and rolled up, and then you touch them and they're like, oh man, that one handles good.
Yeah. So, and I think to me that's me too, because I always, Kyle Smithwick said this one time. He said, the back's the first thing that judge is going to evaluate. I mean, obviously he's going to see him walk in the ring, but they're going to touch. That's how in 90% of our shows in Texas, right?
Sure.
If you're going to get a pull, it's going to be on the handle, and that's when we're going to know you're going to go through the scale, and you're probably going to be in the top end to make the sale.
Yep, potentially make the sale, yeah.
They've got a handle. They got to have some one edge shape to them. That's big to me. I love a big one edge in a sheet. But I'm with you on that. Handle, touch quality, I think is really important. Then I think that's when you start sprinkling in some of the other stuff like, bledding or stride. Is it short enough? Is his chest good enough? Is his rear flank good enough? That's when you start kind of throwing in those other things. But, center body, forearm, touch, side view shape, those are things that I'm going to initially sort to get that one to the top before I start making a commit of whether I want to purchase this animal or not.
Yeah, and I think you said it, and I think that's probably the biggest key. Like as we talk about this, we kind of, offer some sort of, educational tidbits for people that, might be new or wanting to learn or get better or just, driving down the road and have absolutely nothing else to do. But if you think about it, like it is like we've seen it countless times, and like maybe some of the Midwest shows might vary in this just a little bit, but you think about like our Texas major show scene, and you think about sale spots and kids making the sale, and at the end of the day, like for hell, I would say all of us, like that's still the goal. Like you want to get paint on their back, right? And yes, a judge when they walk in, 80 walk in a class, maybe he does pull 5. Well, there's still, let's take Houston, for instance. There's still 13 sell spots, that we're all fighting for, right? And so we stack those things in rear view, and like you said, they go to handling them. And if those things are squishy or handle like a Nerf football, or they're this wide, like it's not going to matter. Like it's not like they could have the biggest, widest legs, kid could do a killer good job showing, like a lot of different things, but like they stack them in there for a reason, like, and they go to handle them. And so you might have multiple flaws with that sheep. Maybe he's a little chubby over his ribs. Maybe his neck's a little short. Maybe in motion, his hip and hind leg doesn't hinge and work the right way. But if we'll stack those things in and you get that good first handle, man, sometimes like you can kind of slip in there and get you a sell spot with one that you're just kind of like, whoo, glad we got that one dotted. Like, because, we've all been there. Like we can all try to chase around and buy the great ones, and, we're all trying to find the one that'll win. But like sometimes at the end of the day, if we're being realistic, you kind of get out there in some of those classes and you're like, dude, there was 15 in there that were good. I'm just glad that I was 16th and I got a sell check.
I remember talking to my crew after Houston this year. And we took a chance on some sheep last year that we had bought and put into different people's hands that were, cooler looking, the shallower, cooler looking ones that run uphill, and get into that big ring somewhere like Houston. I mean, get your teeth kicked in. And I told my crew afterwards, I said, we are never not buying sheep again that don't have muscle.
Yep.
We're going to put that foremost and up front because, like you said, at the worst, we come out there with the sell slot.
Absolutely.
We might not win it, but we're going to come out there with the sell slot. Yep. Safe face.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah.
You know me, I've been on this golf kick here.
Yeah.
We can get up and down.
42 years later.
Right?
Look at you. Oh, my goodness. You read that somewhere.
I did not read that.
Holy cow.
I used to play a lot of golf in college.
And that's the deal. And I mean, like we talk about it, like save face, but also for what we're doing in the again, when we're probably gonna reference the Texas major show scene a lot because it's obviously our bread and butter. But like save face, get a sell check, right? Like I mean, we're all in the same boat. Like that helps. That helps us play next year. Like that lets us put the coins in, and let the game continue.
Now, we're not saying go out there and find the ugliest pin that is
Fact.
the thickest one in there. It's not
Fact.
what we're saying.
So
There are some that are just too much.
yeah, and with that being said, so like like you said, okay, so we're we've found this, we found a handful of them. Maybe we've sorted them into a pin, and I think as we kind of talk about that, if you go to people's house and you're looking. And maybe this doesn't necessarily work great like in a live sales situation, but we try to do it a lot like the way that our stuff's set up. I always tell people like, hey, if you want to sort a few of these over and look at them later amongst, kind of the ones you like it's just sorting stock. Like, let's do it. And so let's say that, we've got 6 or 8 of these things that we've got sorted over. They're big armed, they're big bodied, they handle good. We've set them up and they handle good and their pin bones are big. Like they've checked a lot of the boxes, right? I mean, kind of a pretty good one so far. Okay, bells and whistles. We've got them turned sideways.
And I think the bells
Shep's
and
setting them up.
whistles-
Where are we at?
I think the bells and whistles is what separates us from $3,500 sheep to a $15,000 or $20,000.
Sure.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree. And I think that's what, and I think, not to deter anyone, from buying them because I think there's 2 things to that. Yes, absolutely. The high end pieces, the intangibles that are hard to make, the things that make that animal unique, and no different than the things that make a painting unique or a vintage book or anything else. Like there are things about each particular one, that might set that one apart from its contemporaries, and that's where that one all of a sudden, has more value. Now, that value is determined by the market a lot of times, guys bidding online, guys buying in a live sale. And I think we also have to, like kind of keep in the back of our mind and remember like that could also just be 2 guys that decided, hey, I want that one, right? I want that one bad. Like I believe the term is pissing contest.
Where 2 fools met.
Yep, there you go. And so like those 2 guys, I mean, look across the aisle and say, "Let's get it on." And that might be the difference in one bringing X amount and bringing 3X amount. So we've got those things. We've got them turned sideways. What are if we're going to hit on 1 or 2 of those things, or maybe just it doesn't have to obviously limit it, but bells and whistles. What are they?
Bells and whistles to me, this is a hot topic right now, but do they got enough fur on their legs? And does that fur match their foot size?
Sure.
I think that's key too, right? There's some furry ones out there that are dime-footed.
Yeah, look like a baby deer.
Yeah, I can't stand that. But fur,
Sure.
I think chest, the shallowness of their chest, how far is that thing shoved up in there? Their sternum shoved up in them. And then probably their coloring, right? I hate to say that too, but if they've got all those things we just talked about, and they're white featured on top of it, that's probably going to set you apart, right?
Well, it is, and it's not that it's a deal necessarily, and I see this all the time online. You can't eat shag, or like color shouldn't matter, and I'm not arguing with that, but at the end of the day, we're also trying to separate ourselves. 80 sheep walk into the class at San Antonio or Houston. Like, you got to think about the things that are going to make you different. Like, make that judge actually just give you that extra like look to see all of those things that we checked off: big arm, big bodied, big pin bones, like all that stuff. And like, I find it a little bit comical, and honestly, I think it just doesn't make any sense. Like, those judges aren't sorting them on leg hair or fuzz, but it's might have been something that like gravitated toward it, and it does. It gives them like a good look, like they stand out. Green shavings at Houston, bright lights, and you got one that's just snow white colored. Like, they're gonna pop, like they're gonna look, and so it might just be a deal that makes them look. Hey, I need to look at that thing. Like, that thing's pretty cool. Looks good moving around, whatever the case may be. And so it's not I guarantee we took a panel and we pulled the best 100 evaluators and we stuck them all in a room. Hey, where do you prioritize leg hair? None of them are even going to have it on. It's just it's just a thing that kind of is a part
I
of
think
our
it's
deal right now, and it's just something that might kind of give
it's an indicator.
indicator. Yeah, thank you.
To me, it's an indicator that animal has been properly cared for.
Sure, absolutely agree with that 1,000%.
They polished the chrome on this
Yep.
before they went to the car show.
Yep.
They've taken the time, the effort. It's there.
Yeah.
That's just an indicator.
Yep, absolutely, and it is. It's something that I think without question. I mean, we've all seen it. We've all spent the time, doing legs or whatever that looks like. But yeah, you see that kid out there that their leg wool's big and pretty and groomed well, and it's like, hey, that kid's probably been busting his tail, like making that all look good, like
And I think we're to the point now too that the really obnoxiously haired ones,
yeah,
they don't do
no,
very well.
no,
It's almost too much. But the ones you see that's nice, it's fit, it's been trimmed.
cleaned up good, looks good. Well, and where the industry's at from us, from especially, I mean, and I know we're obviously talking. Well, hey, let's be honest. Like the goat world's kind of following the same deal that we probably did 5 or 6 years ago in the sheep. As far as some of those things, breeders, maybe paying a little more attention in some of those things. Being a little hairier legged or whatever. But I think if you sit back and like, especially in the sheep side, everybody's made them fuzzy. It's just kind of a wash right now.
Yeah.
Like on the good ones, like they're Hampshire influence, especially if it's tended to well long term. Now we have them, and they're scattered everywhere. I know every breeder has them. Like, hey, that one's not real fuzzy right now, but like, hey, he's out of this and this and this. Like, there's plenty of they're gonna get fuzzy. Like, go home, take care of it, rinse and blow legs, spend some time on it, and so it just becomes hey, as long as you tend to it, it's gonna be fun.
I think it's in a little bit environment driven. I take that into account when I'm selecting. Like, if I'm at my place in Texas or yours in the Panhandle or Neff's right up the road, or kind of in between us, right? Let's just say the western half of Texas, right? And we look at those baby lambs. They're probably not going to be as fuzzy as babies as the ones you look at in Iowa.
Sure. Yeah.
They're
It's
just not.
yeah.
But I still don't question it. I've had people come to my house and they go, "You think that thing's going to be hairy enough?" Well, hell yeah, he's going to be hairy enough.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's where we live, right?
Well, it's the same way. Like I'm sure, and at some point, I know we'll probably have like somebody that's a little more like show cattle, world. Like those guys would probably are probably like kind of giggling at this, like the calves that come out of off some ranch in South Dakota, versus the ones that come out of some place in Abilene. It's probably like, yeah, there's gonna be a little difference but then they all show up.
Okay.
They all show up at Fort Worth, and it's like they're all hairy.
Yeah.
So, okay, so yeah, we kind of went on that spill, and I know that's obviously a topic that we're going to continue and hit on. Maybe it's kind of been a little bit of a
We never
hot topic.
said anything that we're actually shooting this podcast in hallowed grounds right now.
We are. I actually sent a Snapchat out when I walked in, and like I don't actually know. I know this is a boardroom, but like all these books around, like immediately as soon as I walked in, like I felt a little smarter.
Yeah.
Like
We're shooting this at the home of champions, Texas Tech University.
that's right. Yep. Big shout out to the Red Raiders. I guess Dr. Sam Jackson kind of got us the hookup in here. Yeah.
And I told somebody, Wendy Scott was up here, and she kind of helped us hook some of this stuff up. And I said, I don't know many ag colleges in the U.S. where you can just walk in, walk
that is true.
upstairs, peek your head in. As they're sitting, Dr. Jackson and several others are sitting having a board meeting, and I said,
I believe they were interviewing applicants when you
yeah,
actually.
for the meet science. And I said,
Yeah.
hey, you boys having an important meeting? And they said, yeah. They said, we'll be done. in about
Kindly
30 minutes.
leave, sir.
You're more than welcome to have this when we're done. So cool to be back. Both tech grads.
Yeah, that was a like a very like whenever we had the opportunity to do this, and we're gonna hopefully have a chance to do some other stuff around Lubbock, but like just to I guess have them willing to. I mean, we're obviously just kind of getting started in this, and it's like, oh yeah, you want to do that? Yeah. Oh, here's the boardroom that we do everything in. Okay, so
Gut instinct versus checklist thinking.
yeah, hang on. I want to hit on one thing because we talked about this, and I think this can sometimes be a little bit harder, maybe for folks that aren't. I'm going to use the term advanced, but let's just say experienced. Chest You hit on that a while ago. We talked about the bells and whistles. Okay. Chest, rear flank, chest to flank ratio, whatever you want to call it. That silhouette that those animals can give us from the side. Tell me why you think that matters and where it kind of lands as far as, is that the difference in you being first or third, or is it just like, kind of like the leg will deal, like, oh, hey, looks cool.
Yeah. I think that to me, that's what separates. I don't know if this may need to be edited. That's what separates the difference between a trader sheep and a sheep that I'm probably going to keep to try to win a major stock show.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Because I know if we've got the muscle and the center body and all those things, I'm going to get
all those things that we checked on. Yeah.
I'm going to get up there probably in the top 10, but that's where we're going to start separating those things. I don't, no matter what evaluator it is, the chest to flank ratio, right? I think that's what separates probably a nice sheep to a really good one.
Well,
and ease of feed throughout the year too, right? I think
sure.
those type of sheep are just easier to maintain and manage throughout the year, right?
I think that's absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I think it kind of goes back. I think it can kind of be twofold there. Those ones that are like, and let's say the guys that are raising stockers and real world stuff in the Flint Hills of Nebraska are not going to say like chest doesn't matter, and I would probably agree with them in that scenario. But like, let's talk about flank, like, because we talked about them being big ribbed, right? So those ones that are like big ribbed and swoopy bellied, like, I mean, soggy flanked, whatever you want to call it, like, those are going to be practical. Like, so we're talking real world and showtime. Those are going to be practical, like maybe a little easier fleshing, a little easier doing, like maturity could be a little better on them instead of those ones that like maybe like what we kind of grew up showing. Like, there's actually a picture in your office of like this blue one, and man, that thing was like, I bet he handled
really good.
I bet he handled it incredible. Oh, I bet it was so good. But like, so we're talking about chest and flank, and like, I think the chest deal comes in to play maybe more of a uniqueness, because I find myself sometimes when I'm evaluating, if they are big center bodied, and by no means do I like them deep, but like sometimes maybe if they're proportional in their underline, you can be like, hey, I'm going to let that one slide. I know he's not as shallow and freaky maybe up there in terms of his chest and his sternum and all that, but like that thing's rib cage is built like a 55-gallon drum. So why we want them big ribbed in order to put everything, stack everything up on top, it's kind of one of those deals like, I get it. Especially if like, now, if the one that's sitting right there and the one that we're trying to make a call on is shallower and still big rib too, okay, no brainer. We're going to go with that one. But if it's one of those deals that maybe he's a little more closed off and like he's shallow, but like, hey, that one's a little flatter in terms of his forerib, like he offers us that kind of that real good two-dimensional look, but like you kind of step in behind him or you step in that three-quarter, you're like, man, that one just ain't pulled apart enough. That's whenever, the chest deal to me has always kind of been like, all right, we got to pay attention to it, but like we can't get so lost in making them shallow that we lose, maybe what we're actually trying to chase as far as.
And I think too with the soggy rear flank in them, you can feed probably a max amount of rear flank into them, and that's going to give them the appearance that they are shallower chested.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
I hate to say it, you can fool a lot of evaluators.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll get on the mic and say, boy, this thing is so shallow.
Yeah.
No, I just fed a really big rear flank.
Yeah, he's swoopy bellied. That's really all he is. You drenched him. He got 7 guns of swell and 7 guns of water right before you walked in. I mean, yeah, you can change those things. Sure. And so that's but definitely like going, kind of going back to what we talked about, because again, we've checked, maybe 4 or 5 of those big indicators we absolutely have to have. And now we're kind of talking about, those things that are, they're the bells and whistles. They're the things that might highlight, and they're the ones that might make some things, stand out and, look different and all that.
So price pressure. Can we talk about that?
Hang on, we got to hit on one thing, because it's something that I think we see it in different stages, and we see it because it depends on who's evaluating. Watching those sheep in motion. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about what those things look like. We've checked all the boxes. We found the ones with the bells and whistles. Okay, where are you at on? I know your hip and hind leg, no doubt, got to be good. Where are we at on those things? Moving around the ring, kind of, maybe some indicators because we've kind of checked the structural correctness box. I feel like for what we've talked about. We talked about them having to be, wide and opened up, square underneath. Hip and hind legs got to be right. So really, from a structure standpoint, we're pretty good. On this animal that we've kind of all built up in our mind, and hopefully our listeners are driving down the road, thinking, man, I'm gonna go find me one of those at Logan or Sam's house. But where are we at on those things like moving? We get into that deal where sometimes guys are like, they get to the top five, or let's say they get to the top 10. All right, let's walk them, and then they place one. And then they get to the top 9. All right, let's walk them, and then they place one. We continue to do it, and they just kind of one at a time. But we continue and walk. It's a little track meet, and you get some guys that I always say they walked them in and walked them out. Where do you land on that? Where do you find? And I know we're in talk. It kind of goes back to the evaluator, but like, where's maybe some happy ground that you can just kind of feel comfortable with, like where we're sitting right here today, and we know who's judging one of our major stock shows.
Yeah, I feel like that I'll take the happy medium on that, right? I'll obviously I want to watch them move around the pin when I'm selecting them. Do they hold their head carriage up when you let them go? I don't want that one that's dead and his head just kind of hangs there like a limp noodle. His ears are down, his head's down, blades come up above his chine, that kind of deal. That's going to hinder me, so to speak. Does he kind of float around when you let him go? Nothing's just too like rigid, or joints aren't too rigid or nasty. Does he hold his head carriage up a little bit? Does he kind of throw his head up and look at you? I think that's important, and I think it's really important for those people listening, and us too, with still young kids.
Absolutely, huge deal.
Those short neck, down headed ones. Our kids aren't going to be able to make them move right in the ring and look good enough. And that's a lesson that I've learned the hard way.
Absolutely.
And that's something we still struggle with, even in the Silvers household, is we come home every time and I say, we don't lead good enough. We're not leading good enough. We got to lead better. And I'm always harping on my kids about that. But at the same time, I'm like, Dad probably didn't do good enough job selecting the animal that moves in good
and runs. Yeah, and tidbit there for listeners that want to, if you'll follow Sam on Snapchat, he's always got some unique ways to make those sheep walk down the road, the Kalichi Road there. So feel free to, hit him up and see if he can give you any insight on that.
I gave up
probably
on the
not something we can put on
called?
Drench Line. I'm kind of the same way. Like, and now, I want those things to move good. We're the same way. Like, we walk up and down the road. When kids are practicing, I tell them get in the yard, and it's usually get in the yard, and then we walk down the Kalichi Road, and that's kind of how we spend our time, hand walking and whatever. And it always ends with one of them fighting or crying. I mean, that's just how it is. But like it's what we do. But like, I think the biggest thing for me, as far as watching those things in motion, again, we talked about it. Like, I'm going to study their hip and hind leg. I'm also like, full-time shepherd, right? So like, I get to see those things typically at home, whether we're sorting ewes, looking at bucks, watching the babies, kids are at school. Like, I kind of evaluate a lot of stuff, like a good buddy, Robert Ashley would always talk about sitting on a bucket, and just watching the sheep. And I think that's a good indicator of like probably where I land, whether it's whenever I'm buying or whether I'm, evaluating a show. Like, I want to study some like things, but also just kind of want to see what those things look like naturally. Like, just because all the same things kind of fit. Does things fit? Does it work? Does it balance? Structurally, is their spine flat? Like that's probably, I'm probably not as big on, oh my gosh, they got to, run uphill and, be geeky and, all that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm more like, I want to see them things flat spine, and I want to see them handle their hip and hind leg the way they're supposed to. That's just, and I think if you do that, you can find good middle ground no matter who's judging.
Yeah, I can't wait till we have an episode on evaluators and evaluation.
Ooh.
There's plenty of soapboxes there. So now you've made those points. Can we get to gut instinct versus checklist thinking?
Yeah,
I've got a theory on. I've got my own.
So would you like me to think about it from a buying perspective, or would you like me to think about it from an evaluator's perspective?
Mine.
Oh, buying. Okay. Gut instinct. Um,
versus checklist?
yeah, I'm a bad gut instinct buyer. Like they just and I'm probably a little bit like that also as an evaluator. Man, when they freaking hit me, they just hit me. Like and I'm just
And
like
there's no going back.
there's no going back and I know that like, I'm probably just going to buy this thing no matter what he costs and then I'm going to like, figure out if I got any copper wire that I can sell at home or something. Just I mean, I'm just going all in. I'm pushing the chips in and then it's
Yeah.
like, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm always happy, right
I
up until the
was
point that it doesn't work.
genuinely thinking about this, and you on the way up here today too. Was you're a swing big,
Woo!
miss big, hit big kind of guy, right? And I'm the guy that's like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna try to milk something out of something, right? Like it may just be a reserve champion Southdown or something, but I'm gonna get me something before I get out of here. And
Yeah,
you're like the
no,
babe. You're swinging for the fences every
I'm
time.
I am definitely that's definitely where I kind of land.
I
It's part
think
of the reason we talked about it last time. Like it's part of the reason that I have to I can't give up on them. Like I just have to
yeah,
I'm committed. Like I'm in
you are
that down there in that
fully
foxhole. Like
committed.
I gotta fight.
You got to get out of here. So I think I used to be a gut instinct kind of guy, and I think I still am to a point. But I hate to keep, beating a dead horse on this. But as the prices of these things have risen,
Sure.
I'm not as much a gut instinct guy because used to I would walk in and I'd be like, "Yep, that's him. Let's go." Now it's like, "Yep, that's him." Oh, how much is he?
How much does he cost?
That's when we start going through the checklist. Okay, like I know if this thing's going to cost me 10, 15, $20,000, like stuff's going to have to fit a little bit better, right?
Right. Well, and I think that also, as we talk about this and, separating ourselves from the breeder, the seller, even, the advisor in some capacity to our customers, whatever you want to, call that, and just think about it strictly from like stock show dad standpoint, it also, the checklist becomes more and more real to me as we're sitting here again. We talked about it like we don't know who's doing our major stock shows, and so you're kind of like that. That's where like I think you kind of almost like hedge a little and can like think about like, okay, well that one like hits me hard. And going back to what you talked about, like, okay, that's the one that hits me hard. Well, let's say San Antonio just announced theirs. Like, does that hit Jason Simpson and Jake Warnchest hard? That's maybe when that checklist really starts. Like, I know he hits me. I know if I'm judging like grand champion honors, let's get out of here. But does it hit those guys? And that's probably where like that checklist can become more and more of like
But we're not showing at the County Road D in Knowlton, Texas jackpot.
we should have a jackpot there. It'd be fun. Set up like a tent.
We'd
Yeah.
never get started. You'd be late to your own jackpot.
Well,
So, okay, price pressure. Does budget, obviously, I think that kind of answers itself, right? Does budget change the decision or does the price change a decision? And I think it does, right?
I think it does with everybody, and I don't care if your disposable income is astronomical or even if you're a swing for the fence guy. Like budget is still real, right? Like I mean, we're all, if we want to be honest, spending more than we should, and these things obviously cost a lot of money, and families are doing everything in their power to try to buy the best ones they have and have the nice stuff at home and the nice trailer. Like, I mean, let's, real world stuff. So yeah, I mean, budget's always going to be a deal that is going to drive people in some capacity. We're having a live sale tomorrow. There could be, a guy that walks in that thinks that no matter what, he's buying one of those lots. And then if, again, those two fools link up, like at some point, he might be like, well, he wants him worse than I do. And that all goes back into, their budget or what they're willing to, sacrifice or whatever.
Probably what I'm fixing to get into tomorrow night.
Yeah. No, you got to be that guy that just bows up, looks across the table and says, let's get it on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. That's
I'm
what I love
feeling
to
it.
hear. I love to hear that. But
My alma mater.
I also think that like we have to remember like, and I kind of always keep this in the back of my mind, and like I use it as a little bit of like, maybe a little motivation. Like there's always going to be somebody that can spend more than you. This is a feeder's game. Like if you buy that one though, that's like maybe he's not perfect, maybe he's not exactly the high seller, but like, hey, that one fits my barn, that one fits my kid, that one fits the guy that I'm going to because I did my homework and I know that lot two is better than lot one for this particular show. And even though so-and-so bought lot one and that was the one to buy that day because he did look, maybe the best and maybe even the one that I like the best, that lot two, like if I'll do my homework and I'll go home and we'll take care of that thing we're supposed to, and we'll feed and exercise and, all the stuff, and we'll get him out and jackpot him and, give that sheep the best opportunity that genetically is possible. Like, it's a feeder's game. Like, use it as a challenge. Like, go beat that guy.
Still fun too,
absolutely.
Right? Like that's funner to me than just going out and buying the high dollar one and keeping him the high dollar one and winning with him. Not saying that winning's not fun at any level, but it's fun to go out there and find that one that's it's $2,500 or whatever he was, and feed on him and win with him.
Well, and that's how, like, and obviously I'll reference Papa K, in this deal. I mean, like, he was always, and, I grew up with parents that were education school teachers. Like, so we didn't, and maybe Dad was a little smarter than I am. Like, he would pump the brakes sometimes whenever I just try to swing for the fence. But like, it was like, going to Brosix back in the day, like I referenced it, in one of those first couple of episodes, like the sheep that I went to Dallas with, he literally came home and like he had like 4 joints that needed to be taken off his tail. I mean, like, and I think that sheep brought $1,100, and but like, you kind of got to be creative. You got to have imagination. You got to know, hey, and he was fat. Probably found him over stuck in the corner of the feed trough, knowing him, and nobody else saw him, but like. Yeah, and then we took him home. We did a tail job on him. We tracked him, and like all of a sudden it's like, hey, we might have something. So I think just because like, and you see it all the time, and I get it, and it can be frustrating. We're candid, and we talk about things openly. Like, I really, really wanted to buy that sheep that sold at Blue Bloods last year, and that one ends up winning Fort Worth. And
I can't repeat on camera what Graham said.
Yeah, I mean, so like, like there's always somebody that might, outbid you, and so you just kind of got to go home and like, hey, I'm pretty decent at this. Like, I'm gonna try hard, and we're gonna see what happens. Maybe beat them, maybe don't, maybe you're third, but like
that Blue Bloods final cross panned out pretty good.
Yeah. If you're into red ribbons.
So, give me 3 questions, gut check questions before you commit. Before you commit and say, yep, I'm going to take him home.
I would say the first one, kind of goes back to that. Does he fit the judge? I think you have to be very aware of that situation.
Does he fit what I'm doing this year?
Yeah. Does he fit our program? Let's say that.
Because I don't want him to think that like you need to go and buy a sheep.
For sure. Great point. Yep. Great point. No, does he fit our program? Does he fit our program? And that can be, does he fit our house? Does he fit our kids? Does he fit the shows that we're going to? And that can be as much as age-wise. Like, see some of these guys that'll call, and, hey, I saw that you're having your fallborn sale, and it's like the first part of December. Like, I wanted to ask you about lot 1. All right, yeah, cool. Look, real good sheep, blah, blah, blah. Tell him how he's bred. All right, well, we got a county show next April. Do you think he'll work for that? No, he will not. Like, that would definitely have to be on one. Does he fit the program? Program at home, kids showing ability, and then maybe what show he's going to, and obviously that kind of comes in there and falls in line with the judge's perspective. I know that this is probably definitely not something you're going to agree with. If we had your wife on here, she could back me on this. But like, I like to know how they're bred. I'm very.
I think you're taking this a little too far.
I'm very aware of how some of those things feed that we have had some success with, and there's some consistency there. And so I just kind of always, and like, we're having to buy these things as 60, 70, 90-day-old babies. Like, we're trying to project out at the end of the day. Like, doesn't it sound crazy? You just gave $5,000 for a 75-day-old baby lamb or goat, and you're trying to project out how he's going to grow 12 months from now? If people were not involved in our game, they would say, y'all are stupid.
Have a whole other podcast about this, knowing the breeding behind the weather that you're fixing to buy.
Yeah, but I just think
the turnover rate of genetics is so fast nowadays, and bucks nowadays are year 1
and then done or whatever.
It's like, well, how do we know? Now, it's not saying that I don't ask. I still ask how they're bred every time, But I think I look at it more of the second generation and the third generation. That's what I take into account more, right? Because that's where we're going to start getting our predictability. Like, okay, is this
Absolutely.
one, a first year buck? We really don't know how those are going to
Yeah.
feed or do. But is he a chief unicorn,
Yeah. Did
something
his
like that
dad
on the
do
backside?
something? Yeah. Is he the? Yeah.
They did
Well,
something, and we know that there's some predictability.
and I think the probably the thing that I like to keep up with, bucks are always the first thing you hear, right? Somebody says, "Hey, how's that one bred?" That's always what they're going to say. I like to try to keep up with what some of those females have done. We probably fall into a little bit of a small circle there in terms of where we buy sheep. I don't know. You might disagree with that. But like we've had some of those ewes that have raised some of those sheep that we've been successful with. So the next year when I go to, to that place, or the next year on the, the ones at the house, I want to be like, okay, hey, she raised that one last year and that's how he fed. That's what he did. Now I know this one's out of a different buck, whatever. But it's just something to kind of like, I feel like it's something you can kind of add to that checklist. Like you're kind of in there, you're making those decisions, and like, so that's probably the thing that I would kind of land on second. So does that one fit our program? Does he kind of check all of those things? And then I like to kind of know a little bit of genetic background and kind of where those things kind of land from that perspective. And then I think the last thing, and it can sometimes be hard because we might be traveling solo, or if you have ran around with me very much, maybe I do stuff late at night. Um, I love if one of my kids is there to have them set them up, because I think that kind of goes back to what you were talking, like, does he look good on that one? Does Joe look good on that one? Just kind of that last little final, like, hey, y'all grab that thing and set him up. Just kind of that, like, does it look like it could all blend when they're a year down the road? Like, that's always something that we try to do. And also, like breeders are used to showing those sheep. So, like, let's be honest, like, they might be able to hide a few flaws, what they got. So, like, put the kids on them and just see, like, hey, does everything look like I did right before I, signed this check?
I did that. I mean, while you were at the hair salon, I was down.
Barber? I go to a barber. I don't go to a hair salon.
I thought you were like getting curls. As long as you took there, I thought maybe you were getting your nails done or something. Uh, I was looking at your set down there, and the one that I wanted to look at, I had Shep get on him. I said, "Hey, get on that sheep, set him up." Sets him up. I told Graham. Graham was standing there. Shep's 4'9". Graham's 6 foot. Graham, get on that sheep. I wanted to see the difference. I
Yeah.
just did that. Like, what? How does that sheep match up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Those are kind of the three that I guess, right there before we kind of, file them in.
So, last thing before we close out this episode, if we're picking multiple animals for Texas majors, for multiple kids, right? Like, we've got to pick for multiple kids. I've got 2 kids of my own,
Multiple breeds.
multiple breeds. We help a bunch of people. We've got to find sheep for those people. What's your strategy there? I wonder how different it is from my strategy.
I think mine is probably gather. I always say I'm a hunter gatherer. Like, I'm going to drive around, run around, beat the bushes, and I'm just going to gather up as many good ones as I can possibly afford. Going through that checklist, going through all the things that we've talked about in this episode, like, good ones are good ones. We've got 5, 6, 7 options, as far as, from Dallas to Austin, on where ones that might be different can fit. So we're going to gather up as just many good ones as we can. And, both of us are in similar situations where we got some families that rely on us to, help them in those selections and in that hunting and gathering process. And so that's kind of always my deal, is like, there's always going to be different budgets. Sheep are going to cost difference, like whether it's finals or crosses, whatever that looks like. And so it's kind of just one of those deals. I mean, I've obviously been to your place, and, as many, finals and crosses we've bought and traded over the years from, like, you guys. Like, sometimes I buy 4 or 5 of the real expensive, real good ones. And then sometimes I'm like, hey man, I got a couple of real young families, but like our budget's not quite there yet. Like, a little imagination. Show me that skinny pen. Like, let's get in there and let's dig around and let's do some livestock sorting, and just see if there's not something in there that we can find that looks like, hey, in 60 days and 90 days, like, that one's going to make one. And so that's kind of my philosophy, is like, we're going to try to gather up as many as we can. I always tell the kids, don't name them till validation because
It may change.
it may change. And like that one, I mean, we've had it before, like taking a sheep to a jackpot, wins the jackpot, and Monday he's gone.
Yeah, and you were talking about that earlier. I thought about we were talking about in the big ring and seeing what they look like. Last year we had a weather that we took to a jackpot weekend. You were there, just donkey stomps at
Yeah,
all four
yeah,
rings, right? And I'm thinking, man, I got one here. Uh, go to Kansas City, get him in a big ring on a big stage, and I sit there and go, he's not good enough.
right.
He was good enough at that little jackpot in that little ring in the middle of the summer, but
Yeah.
just not.
And I mean, I think that's the thing that like people can't beat themselves up about. And I mean, like even,
Not
guys, I
saying
mean,
he was a bad sheep. He was
absolutely.
still a great sheep.
Yeah.
But if
We're,
we're talking about sorting hairs, cutting fine hairs here.
and you would have went through all of that checklist that we talked about. You would have tied into all the big things. That sheep would have probably had majority of the bells and whistles. And then sometimes you get there and you're just like, hey, that's a nice one. That one's not good enough to maybe do what we're trying to do. And it's just part of it. Like you guys have had success. We've been fortunate to have success on the big stage. And like it's just part of it. Like again, we're trying to project these things out, and like you're hoping that everything goes in line and everything works, whether it's, sheep, goats, what I mean, and obviously any of the species, but like it's just part of it. Sometimes you get them out there and if you're objective and you don't just go back and kick the bucket and say, that damn judge has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah.
No, man, that sheep,
Just wasn't good
he
enough.
just wasn't good enough. Like it's part of it. We've
gotta
all
be
been there. I have my sheep shear loves to come, about February, and there is no telling the dollar amount of sheep that he will take to harvest and butcher. I always tell him like, hey bud, that's prime lamb. Like that stuff. He's like, why'd you buy that one? I'm like, I'm not real sure right now.
real
I don't know why I did that. So
Crazy things happen.
yeah, so I mean that's kind of that's my deal. Does that vary for you? Are you
Yeah, no, I don't. Maybe a little bit. I think when you're buying we're gonna go out and try to buy the best ones we can, right? And put those together, and then from me to there, I think budget seems to sort a lot of that out. How do we get these into all these different homes and make sure that all these different families and kids are successful? And it's not like I pick and choose and I have a favorite or anything like that. I think budget just naturally kind of sorts itself
dictate
out,
some of that?
right?
Yeah,
Dictates.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree. Okay, all right. So I think we get wrapped up. All right, so I hope that I've got something down there that checks some of those boxes. I can't wait till tomorrow night. Whenever you're probably going to be on the front row. I bet bidding.
No,
Oh,
I may just stay at the hotel and bid online or something.
golly. I'm going to tell everybody, hey, y'all watching. If Sam's bidding, that thing checks all the boxes. Okay, and you need to probably bid on that one.
Too bad the sales aren't going to happen when this podcast.
I know. So that's kind of a wrap on episode 3. We talked about obviously walking in the pen. The things that hit us hard, the things that we can't accept not being very very good, the things that maybe we kind of want to make some of those decisions or make some of those tough decisions and those close calls on. I think whenever we talk about after we've made that selection, I kind of talked about a while ago, like we signed that check, we're loading him in the trailer, we're taking them home. So next time we'll hit on what that looks like.
Yeah, going home with that animal, shots, halter breaking, getting them to eat, keeping them on feed, keeping them healthy. That's what the next episode's going to be about.
Yeah, I feel like this one so far, and I think a lot of our listeners and our guests will probably agree. Like, I think the first 3 episodes of Drench Line, everybody knowing us and our buddies and our friends and our customers are probably like, hey, that was really informative. At some point, when are them guys going to really get into it? I think that's next time.
Yeah,
Different mindsets, different feeds, different approaches.
time to start ruffling some feathers.
I can't wait. All right, so we do have a couple of questions, or I guess we got a little handful of them here that we had folks submitted. So again, if you got any questions as you listen, drop us a line on drenchline.com. You can submit them, and as we kind of work through these episodes, we will hopefully try to answer them to the best of our ability, or kind of what we feel like work for us. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the perfect answer to maybe where you live or what the things that you've got all we can do is talk about what we've seen, what we've done, kind of what works for us. So yeah, as we kind of answer through some of these questions, again, drop us a line, drenchline.com. If you got any thoughts, questions, concerns, submit something. I'm not going to tell you that it's the perfect answer for your situation. All we can talk about,
and anything's on the table.
anything's on the table, like
Ask it.
what Sam beard oil he uses.
I didn't put it in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all we can talk about is the things that we have, that we've seen, that we've done in our trials, and probably mostly errors. So Samantha hit us with, do you feed hay, and if so, and so we're gonna make that a 2-segment question, because, and again, I know we'll probably talk about this throughout the these sessions. We probably land a little more sheep friendly, because that is both of maybe our passions a little bit more. And then we've all got our goat buddies that just continue and force our hand on that. So we'll kind of talk about that on the sheep side and the goat side, because I do think that kind of varies.
Yeah. So you and I talked about this other day, just maybe in person or on the phone. I do not feed alfalfa. I feed a grass hay. I feed a grass hay every evening. We feed Tipton 85. That's what we have in round bells that we feed our ewes. It's a fertilized, irrigated Tipton 85. It's a great grass hay. And if you do the research on Tipton, it's kind of, and I'm not saying that's the one you need to feed, but let's just say, coastal, Tipton, something of that, coastal Bermuda. I feed grass hay because I just want to keep their guts working. They're a ruminant animal. They have to have that in their gut to keep it working. They have to have some stem in there. And the reason for that is I don't want to change the protein content in their diet that much. I just want something to keep that gut going, and I know that the feed and supplements I'm using are doing what they're supposed to do. My grass hay's keeping the gut working, keeping things functioning properly, and not shit them out.
Yep. Agreed to a certain point. Agree to disagree slightly, but yeah, I would agree with most of it. Tell me this, okay? Again, 2-part question. Show goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still feed grass hay to my goats too. I don't offer them, much alfalfa. But
Do you chop it up like the professionals do?
I do not chop it up.
You're not a professional.
Yeah,
He's
I'm
not
pro-
a
I am
guys. He's not a professional.
Goat herder. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. The only thing that we do feed alfalfa. We've always fed alfalfa. I'm a big believer in alfalfa, and that is probably I'm sure that someone will have some opinion on that, and quite frankly, I don't care, because I know what's worked for us. We don't feed what let's call horse quality #1, all the leaves. We feed striped, rained on, cheap stuff. Like, I call my guy down the road. I'm like, hey, you got any of that stuff that's been rained on like 3 times and you've raked it twice, and it's got a little stem to it? To me, that's the kind of alfalfa that we feed, and we feed it along with grass. So what we try to do early on is we feed a little heavier alfalfa while they're growing. As that growing curve, as we work through the year, I always call it, we kind of let that pendulum shift. We start off like 75% alfalfa, 25% grass, and then we kind of flip it as the year goes on. So, but again, ruminant animals, some of that, stemmy alfalfa grass that'll get in there and scratch things up, keep things rolling, keep things active, microbial development and all that, without question. Goats, I'm probably going to get in trouble because of the guys that like to sell me goats. I don't know. Probably not. They're probably laughing at us right now. But they aren't big on the hay deal. We still feed hay. They're still ruminants.
We do too.
I feel like they eat better. I have chopped it up a couple of times, so maybe I don't know.
Yeah, like little scissors and chop it up.
Hoof nippers. Yeah. I think it's maybe just kind of what I try to do to maybe get out of whatever we're finishing the day with. I'll just be like, all right, I got to chop the goat's hay while everybody else is like still raking pins.
Mix a cocktail and chop it.
Yep, exactly.
That sounds like a Logan move.
Yep. All right, thanks, Samantha. Hopefully maybe got kind of answered kind of what we do and what we found some success with. Chance, first time Stock Show Dad here. Should I shear my daughter's sheep with a surgical blade? The breed is a Southdown.
Oh man, that's a very good question, Chance. And Yeah, God bless you for being the first time show dad, going through all this. That's a really good question. I think it's a loaded question too. Because when we talk about off breeds, right, we have got to talk about hide quality.
Sure.
Um,
Big
I,
deal.
I think if you know that Southdown is really good hided, he's tight hided, and what I would call has a little belly wool on him, some of those swirls in there, I think you're totally fine with shearing him with a surgical for a major stock show. If you were going to go to just a jackpot, shear him with fines, you're going to be fine. But if we're going to go somewhere like Houston and we have to shear on a Monday and we're not showing until a Wednesday, then you probably need to go with some surgicals. That's going to be my answer.
Yeah, I would agree. What do you do on your jackpot sheep during the summer? Does that vary?
No, we typically always shear those. Well, it'll change a little bit. Depends on if I really want to go like knock somebody's head off or not.
Like
Right?
whenever you call and say, "Hey, are you going to that show?" and then I all of a sudden know that like, "No, dude, Sam's fixing
Yeah,
to
it's
come
gonna
loaded."
change, right?
Yep.
We'll text each other. Like I was just gonna shear with fines and roll in there and be fine.
He'll start drenching like on Tuesday.
Yeah, I find out Logan's coming. I'm like, I'm gonna change my little outlook here. Um, Typically, we'll shear with fines at a jackpot because I want to give them a little extra protection from like fungus and
Fungus.
stuff like
Yep.
that. I don't want to strip them down as hard. And you can shear on a Friday. You're going to show on a Saturday, right? Good sharp pair of fines. I think you're fine with jackpots.
Yep. That's the same philosophy we have. We'll do fines all during the summer, kind of maybe help with combat that fungus deal just a little bit, and yeah, I think that's I think that's a great question, Chance. I think make sure that animal's skin quality is good enough for surgicals, right? And maybe even like a new pair of surgicals. Like we've all got those that have kind of been floating around. You've had for like 10 years, and they've been sharpened like 97 times, and you're like,
They're
whoa.
short.
That's what that dude did to me today when he was lining me up. I bet those were some like
Razor.
some old surgicals he had in the back.
Yeah.
Okay, Chance, good luck. I hope you get to continue being a stock show dad. Don't get frustrated,
Yeah,
buddy.
ask more questions if he is chance.
Yep. Mark. All right. Mark said, I see people. Oh, dude, this is going to be good. I see people with chain halters and rope halters. Do you have a preference? Can we get some music on this right now? Is this where you're like,
So the joke is amongst us is that when we're making fun of somebody, we'll call them those rope halter showers.
rope halter crew?
Yeah, the rope halter crew. God, we're gonna get so much trouble for this one.
Some of our old West Texas buddies are probably going to hear this and be super
Yeah.
mad at us.
Yeah, I am not a fan of rope halters. We're chain halter people. Anybody knows we were the ones that kind of started the West Draw
Yeah.
halter.
Yeah. I actually sometimes forget about that.
So we kind of started that whole, wipe down chain halters that keep the fungus off and all that stuff. But yeah, big chain halters. And I think the biggest for me is when you're teaching those, I think they're safer. I really do. Because if we clip one to the fence or we walk away, if they set back or fall down or something like that and they get up, as soon as they get up and relieve that pressure,
That chain, yeah, kind of releases.
in those rope halters,
Yeah.
are going to suck down on the nose. And I've seen some sheep and goats killed with those.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good. I mean, that's obviously definitely something that you can tell. I always forget that y'all started. I don't know why. Just that seems like ages ago.
You
The
forget that I'm an innovator.
yeah, but you obviously put some. Drury must have put some thoughts into that.
That's all me.
Or you actually probably did kill a really really expensive one. And you're like, hey, we got to change this.
That's a jury.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. But I agree 100%. And I think those animals just respond better. Like when you're trying to halter break them, like give them a little tension there. That rope halter just kind of pulls tight. I think you said something that maybe we don't think about as much, but that wipe down ability to disinfect, keep those things sanitary going from show to show, like that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
And I'm gonna go back to the golf thing, right? Like, getting back into this, I'm gonna play terrible, but by God, I'm gonna look.
you're gonna look good. Absolutely. That's something. And like you can get all those different colors. Like, we got to give our buddy Tyson a plug there. I mean, like those guys have
Supplements.
roll supplements, every kind of color, probably combo. You've probably got some customized
And
ones,
you
don't
know
you?
what? If I'm gonna have a bad lamb there, I'm gonna have a cover on him. I'll have his legs wrapped, and I'm gonna have a nice halter on him. When I walk by the scale, I'm not somebody think, "Cool, man,
Everybody's gonna be like,
I'm
dude,
in
I bet that
trouble."
kid's got a good one,
There's a good one
and
right
then all of
there.
a sudden you like walk
Yeah,
in, they're like, oh, not so much. But you looked great,
you look
man. You looked
great.
great.
Yeah.
I bet that's. There's no telling how much you spent on your golf attire. I mean, I know your new clubs, but your golf attire.
No, I found this shirt I have on, this golf shirt I have on today. That was on sale at Sam's Club.
Oh yeah, we also learned this about Sam. He does some of his wardrobe shopping at Sam's Club. I didn't actually know that that was as big of a thing as apparently it is. So
That's not much different than Hibbett Sports.
Hibbett Sports is awesome. I'll
They do have some good deals.
Hibbett Sports. Yeah, they are gonna sponsor us at some point because all of our sneakers come from there. That kind of wraps up episode 3. I know this one probably gets a little more in line with maybe where we're gonna be lengthwise. I'm sure by the time it gets cut down or whatever, it's kind of shoot for maybe that a little longer than maybe those first episodes or whatever. But hopefully you guys maybe found some information or some subtle humor, one of the two. And yeah, if you get any questions that you would like to submit to us, again, drop us a line, head over to drenchline.com, and you can submit those questions.
Hit follow, leave a review if you're on Apple.
Yeah.
Check us out at Silver's Livestock.
Yep, Silver's Livestock, Newsom Livestock. Both of us got a handful of sales and stuff coming up. I know we're both the same. Like I feel like this is like we talked about it. We're like in the thralls of all of it. Like it feels like it's just 90-0 right now, selling, buying, selling, buying. But like we both sell sheep up until
October 31st.
yeah, yeah. That's what I always tell people. Like when do you sell sheep? Well, we don't sell in November and December, and the rest of the time we are probably selling. So give us a shout. We'd love to help you out. Hopefully maybe we can help you achieve whatever that goal is, it looks like. But yeah, thanks for listening. Like Sam said, follow us, leave a review as long as they're positive.
See you next time. Recom Tech.
Thanks, guys.